Hello, and welcome to Candidates Up Front. This is a public interest election program of Berks Community Television and the League of Women Voters of Berks County. Our May 16th primary election is coming up. Democrats and Republicans will vote for judges, school directors, and county, township, borough, and city officials. The deadline to register to vote is May 1st. To check your voting status, go to votepa.gov. That's vote.pa.gov. You can register, change your party, locate your polling place, or apply for an absentee or mail-in ballot. The deadline to register is May 1st. The deadline to apply for a mail-in ballot is May 9th. The League is interviewing those candidates who wanted to be interviewed in contested races. For each race, the candidates will get the same basic questions and the same amount of time to answer them. Hello, I'm Judith Cranus. Welcome to Candidates Up Front. 4 candidates are competing for a chance to be the magisterial district judge in District 23307. And in case those numbers do not mean anything to you, that includes Bethel, Tuppahawken, Upper Tuppahawken, Marion, Jefferson, North Heidelberg, Upper Bern, and Penn Townships, as well as Bernville and Womelsdorf. So we're talking about the north and west sections of Berks County, though Womelsdorf I think of as south because it's near where I live, but that's okay. There are 3 candidates who are cross-filed, which means they're on the ballot for both the Democrat and the Republican Party. And they are Andrea Book, David Dye, Sean A. Rupp-Consavage, and Jeffrey A. Zimmerman. No, the 3 are the first ones. Mr. Zimmerman is only on the Republican ballot. So there you will see 4 candidates if you're a Republican. You will see 3 if you are a Democrat. And voters in each party will select 1 to be on the fall ballot. So let's talk about what a magisterial district judge does. They handle traffic violations, landlord-tenant matters, civil actions where the amount claimed is less than $12,000, and the judge presides at arraignments, sets bail, issues warrants, and performs duties of a similar nature. The term is 6 years, and the current salary is $106,245. Now, please remember that the views expressed by the candidate are the candidate's views, not necessarily those of League of Women Voters or BCTV. So our interview today is with Sean A. Rupp-Consavage. Welcome, hello. Sean. And would you tell our viewers about yourself and why you're running?
Sure. I have been the mayor of Bernville Borough for the last 6 years, and to be candid, I've lived a privileged life. I feel that I have a moral and an ethical obligation to give back to my community. I have successfully completed the coursework required by the Commonwealth to serve as a magistrate, and I am a lifelong student currently enrolled at Penn State Berks, working towards a degree in organizational leadership.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think you've covered your education and background, which was about the next question. But any life experiences that bring you to this point?
When I was 15, I started in McDonald's, worked my way through being a shift manager, through store manager, through business manager, director of operations, and becoming a partner in the company. So I've learned a lot about perseverance and interacting with people.
Mm-hmm. And if you were going to talk about the personal qualities that you have that would help you be an effective judge, what would you say about that?
I think most importantly is I'm a good listener. I'm able to listen objectively. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm smart enough to know that I'm not smart enough and can learn more. I also am capable of analyzing the facts that are presented without being biased.
And you had talked before we started the interview about an incident that made you feel you wanted to improve the community. Would you like to talk about that, the one at the post office?
Sure. Shortly after I became mayor, it was a rainy Friday night, and I received a text message from one of our residents asking if the police were on duty. I asked why, and they said there were 2 intoxicated teenagers in the post office. So I sent a message to our police officers to respond, but I went to the post office myself. And when I walked in, there were two teenage boys sharing a bag of candy, 2 bags of chips, and 2 cans of soda. And the most offensive thing they did was say, "Hello, sir," and made me feel old. In my mind, we as a community failed them. We failed to provide them a place for them to go on a rainy Friday night in our community. And worse yet, we vilified them and called the police on them.
So, and that led you to think you needed to do,
I need to do better for our community.
and is that one of the things that you're bringing into the district magistrate?
Absolutely. You know, I think there's a very human way of approaching things, not just the clinical answer that's in a textbook.
Ah, okay. Now, can you tell us about the area that's served by this particular court?
Sure. So it is the northwest quarter of Berks County. It includes 2 boroughs, Bernville and Womelsdorf, and 8 different townships, which include Upper Bern, Upper Tulpehocken, Penn, Jefferson, Bethel, Marion, and North Heidelberg.
So that's the area, but tell us about who lives in this district. The
Very,
kinds of
very
things that-
rural areas. You know, some areas of density with communities, but just a very rural but diverse area of people.
And are you involved in volunteer or community work? And tell us about it if you are.
Sure. I was a member of the Bernville Area Community Library and received the award for Outstanding Elected Official. I'm currently serving on the Allenbach Cemetery Board, but probably more near and dear to me is we have created our own nonprofit organization. Shortly after moving into Bernville, we moved into the community's church parsonage. And the first day that I was walking down the steps, there were people peering in the windows of our house. And I quickly realized the importance of our house to the community. So we have formed a nonprofit. We get upwards of 300 kids for Halloween, thanks to the help of a volunteer staff of about 24. We'll do a Christmas open house, put about 100 people through in a weekend. We also offer science camps and scholarships as a way of helping out our community.
And which house is this?
So this is actually our home in Bernville.
But it was important to the community before
Because
you
it-
moved in.
Yeah, because it was actually the parsonage for
For
one
the
of the
church.
church in our community. So, you know, lots of weddings, you know, baptism, things like that done in that home.
So it was very important to the community that that stay something that the community could enjoy.
Absolutely.
Getting into some of those technical things. As a district judge, you're going to deal with matters of civil law and criminal law. And I think a lot of people don't fully understand what those differences are, what the judge's role may be in handling each of them. And I think I'd given you 3 questions on your sheet. We're going to wrap it into one kind of thing, but give you 3 minutes to talk about that. So what is the difference between the civil things you deal with and the criminal things? How does that mean different handling? What are the different things you need to think about? And you can tell stories. That's one way of
Okay.
doing it. Please tell stories.
So typically the civil issues are between 2 different residents or more than 2 residents for issues under $12,000, most commonly landlord-tenant issues. From a criminal issue, it is typically a citation which began with a law enforcement officer, such as traffic violations or, you know, minor legal issues, such as disorderly conduct. The purpose of the district magistrate in civil issues is to see which of the 2 parties has a higher weight of at least 51% of which way to go. In criminal matters, it is our responsibility to go through arraignment, preliminary hearings, setting bail, and binding it over to the Court of Common Pleas.
Well, let's go back for a minute to those civil things. Let's say it's somebody said they would do such and such work at my house, and what they did was really shoddy, so we're in court. We've both got claims. They say, well, I spent this on the parts and da-da-da-da-da-da. How are you going to figure out where that weight is? How do you resolve that?
I think that goes back to you analyze the facts as presented to you. You forget what your own personal beliefs are, what your personal bias are, what you think, and you look at the evidence presented to you. Was there a contract? Did they meet the requirements in that contract? And you base it on the facts.
So if the homeowner who was in that situation brought in pictures and showed you where cabinets didn't fit properly and stuff, that would be something you would...
Absolutely. You'd be able to look at the evidence and go, this does not meet what they agreed to in their contract.
So that's how a homeowner would deal
Present
with
their case,
that.
absolutely.
And a landlord-tenant situation would be pretty much the same. If the landlord had showed where they'd taken a poster down from the wall and the paint had come off,
Right.
that would be the sort of thing.
You know, or proof, if the tenant could prove that they did pay rent in a timely fashion, you would look at the receipts or the canceled checks. And again, it would be about what do the facts tell you.
And in the criminal things, you're looking at a police report, and then you just have the other person's word. How does that...
So I think it's about the totality of the evidence. What does the police report say? What does the officer tell you when they're there? What does the defendant share with you about it? And you look at the total merits of the evidence presented to you.
And in some criminal cases, not the traffic violations, but in some, the district justice has to decide whether there is sufficient evidence for a criminal case, let's say, to go to trial. So you're making a big decision in someone's life on that. What do you consider when you're making that kind of decision?
Again, it goes back to what is the evidence that was presented to you. Can the law enforcement officer present a case that substantiates, the reasonable proof that that defendant did what they're being accused of before you move forward? And if the law enforcement officer is not able to make that argument, then you need to dismiss it.
And what if what the person says disagrees with what the officer says?
Well, how do I say it? It's not about whether they agree or disagree. It's about what does the evidence show. We're all entitled to an opinion, but opinions aren't necessarily the facts.
But doesn't that put the person who's brought in at a disadvantage because they don't have evidence? They can say, it wasn't me, I wasn't there, it must be somebody who looks like me. That's going to cause some confusion, isn't it?
Well, I think it's actually the opposite. The law enforcement officer had the obligation to convince me
that it was
that
the right
the
person.
defendant in front of me is the person who met this and why they believe that. It is not the burden of the defendant to disprove the allegation.
So it's still the innocent or the innocent until otherwise proven.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, thank you. District justices set bail. So what criteria will you use to decide whether bail is needed or how high bail should be? And I know there are various different kinds, and I think for our home viewers, they not be aware of all the technicalities, so it's fine if you want to talk about some of those, but I think we also want to know how you view the burden on the defendant of the bail being set, how you would deal with that.
So I think first off, we need to realize bail should not be used as a form of punishment. Bail has two purposes. First being to make sure the defendant appears for future hearings, and the second being keeping the community safe. Not every defendant should be required to make a monetary cash bail. There are other things that we can do to make sure that they will show up to future hearings and that our communities are safe. I think you also need to look at the nature of the crime that they're being accused of. If we are looking at something very heinous, yes, I think it may be appropriate to have a larger monetary requirement for bail. But I don't think just because you're poor, you should go to jail. I think you also need to look at other things, such as what is their ties to the community. If they've had other interactions with the court system and have been on bail, did they comply or not comply with the bail requirements? I think you need to look at the totality of all of the circumstances. And if it's not necessary to do it in order to keep the community safe, and it's not necessary to do it to ensure that they will show up to future hearings, then we shouldn't be doing it.
Okay. On the larger scale of these things, nobody's in court because they want to be in court. So it does disrupt the community. Are there community problems that the district justice can help alleviate?
So I think if I were to look at my judicial district, I think probably the two largest concerns that we would have would be landlord-tenant issues and currently traffic violations, which was why, as a mayor in Burnville Borough, that it was important to me that we as a community had a public forum and invited the neighboring townships, PennDOT, and legislators to this forum and wanted to hear input from the community on what they saw as the issue with traffic concerns, and from PennDOT and our legislators on how do we address those. So I think there's a lot we can do as a community to alleviate some of these concerns. And I think most of it starts with open and honest dialogue.
And you can see yourself as in the role of district justice being the bully pulpit, I think it's called on the national thing, that you can bring those groups together.
I think it's important that we do, even a landlord-tenant issue. I think our first thing is to have the landlord and the tenant have a conversation and go, can they come to a mutual agreement without needing to involve me as the district magistrate? I just think a lot of these issues, through open and honest communication, can be resolved.
Mm-hmm. But holding another forum wouldn't be a bad idea.
No, and we have another one scheduled as well.
And times change and issues change, and it's a good way to get the community understanding what all those functions are of all those people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think, and I'll say myself included, I don't think we realize the steps and processes that you need to go through to address something as simple as speeding. Yeah. And to get that input from PennDOT, and our legislators on what it'll take was eye-opening.
I'm sure. I'm going to ask you some questions after the interview about that. As a member of the judiciary, what can you do both on the bench and off the bench to ensure that all Pennsylvanians have access to the court and they understand how to access the courts?
I think the first thing you need to do is make sure that you have the resources available to the community to answer the questions they have. The next thing you need to do is make yourself available to the community. I think for me as a candidate, that's why it's important to me on anything that I've published is my personal phone number, my personal email address, and even my home phone number, inviting you to come to my home. Have a cup of coffee with me, get to know me, let me get to know you, and let's have a conversation about how do we make a better community.
Mm-hmm. And talking to our home viewers, who are pretty much all voters, I think, why is it important they vote for this particular position? They may not be in your district, but they're going to vote somewhere. And why is it that district magistrate is one of the things they need to pay attention to?
Hopefully, most people do not need to get involved in the judicial system. But more than likely, if you do, your entry point is in front of a district magistrate. Whether it's from something as simple as a traffic citation or, unfortunately, maybe a criminal issue, you're going to be in front of a magistrate doing a preliminary hearing and getting bail set. And I think it's important that the person that is setting up there on the bench is able to do it in an ethical and fair and humane manner.
So that's why you should vote, because you may be there one time. And you want
hopefully not, but if you do, I'd want to know that the person there is an unbiased, ethical individual.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're ready then for your closing comments.
First, I'd like to thank you and the League of Women Voters, along with BCTV, for having this forum. I'll end with saying my name is Sean Raupkin-Savage. I hope on May 16th you vote for me. But please don't vote for me before you go to my website, which is raup-savage.com. Get to know me. Ask yourself, am I the right candidate for you? Reach out to me. Ask me questions. Scrutinize me. And then and only then will I ask for you to vote for me.
Thank you. We appreciate your coming to talk with us today. I need to remind our viewers that there are 3 candidates on the ballot, and the other 2 are Andrea Book and David R. Dye, and on the Republican ballot there'll be a 4th candidate, Jeffrey A. Zimmerman. And I am going to note that the League of Women Voters Vote 411 should be up and operational pretty soon, probably by the time that mail-in voters are mailed out. The mail-in ballots are mailed out is when it'll be operating. And by clicking on that, putting in your address, it will take you to the candidates on your list. And like Sean said, he has a website. That website will be listed there, as well as answers to questions he and any of the other candidates have provided. So you can really see who the candidates are and get to know them. So that's vote411.org. And I guess as a closing comment, I will say thank you for watching Candidates Upfront. You will find the Candidates Upfront interviews on BCTV and on its website and its YouTube page. And for more information on candidates, you can go to the League's online voters guide, vote411.org. Or you can contact Berks County Election Services, elections@countyofberks.com. Their phone number is 610-478-6490. And thank you for watching Candidates Upfront.